Too often, I see people trick themselves into thinking that their credit card setup is optimized when in reality, they're wasting hundreds, if not thousands of dollars every single year by either leaving points on the table, paying for benefits they'll never use, or missing out on better opportunities because they're just not aware of them. And at the core of it all, they're letting their credit cards use them rather than the other way around. We've all been there, including myself, and sometimes it just takes another set of eyes to tell you what's working and what's not. So today, that's exactly what I'm doing. I'll be auditing 3 of my channel members' credit card setups, working my way up in complexity, starting with a beginner who is now moving into the big dog credit cards, then moving to a cashback aficionado, and then ending with one heavy travel card user with thousands of dollars in annual fees. No matter what cards you have, I'm confident you're going to learn from this one. And if you do like this format, let me know down below and we'll make this a recurring series. With that, let's dive into setup number 1. Nick is one of the most active and long-standing members of this channel, so of course I'm going to have to rip into him today. Jokes aside, he has a very similar setup to what I started with, so this one's going to, be really fun to talk about. As an outline for y'all, Nick, like I mentioned, is pretty new to the credit card game, and he started going pretty hard in 2024 when he added 5 cards. Just like myself, he has an emphasis on earning points and miles, but does desire that cashback flexibility with lenders like Chase and Citi. He takes 3 to 4 trips per year, mainly domestically, but has a big Europe trip planned for 2026, flies with United the most, has no hotel preference, isn't avoiding any lenders right now, so the world's kind of his oyster, except for the fact that he's stuck at 524 until February 29th of 2026. Whenever I talk to anybody in my one-on-one calls or through emails, DMs, etc., who are in a similar position to Nick, the main thing I'm looking to help them do is avoid the hype of certain credit cards that they may think they need to have and finish out certain setups that are just not, super sexy. Looking at his 6 card setup here, he's actually earning in 5 different points currencies, which is spreading his spending pretty thin. And that's honestly not a bad thing, as I've talked about in a past video, which I should probably refresh at this point. And the main reason I say that is because, at least for somebody on team travel, a lot of these points ecosystems have overlapping transfer partners. So if you do end up transferring to those overlapping partners, you're effectively kind of earning in the same currency. So for example, even though on the transferable currency side, he's earning Chase Ultimate Rewards points, Amex membership rewards points, and Capital One miles, all of those lenders have overlapping partners like Air Canada's Aeroplan, Air France KLM Flying Blue, and Virgin Atlantic, just to name a few. There are more than that. So if he is somebody that's using those types of partners, then effectively he's not dividing his points at all. But then again, most of us are traveling domestically the most frequently, and I assume that's the same case for Nick here. And with that being the case, you don't want to spread yourself out too far, especially early on where you might not have super high spend, because when it comes time to redeem for a specific trip that you need, like the Europe trip he's talking about, it may become really annoying to not have enough points with just one lender in particular. With that in mind, there's one card in his setup that sticks out like a sore thumb to me, and it's one that I would strongly consider canceling, and y'all already know what that is. It's the Amex Gold card. Now, listen, Nick, I'm not telling you that you have to close this thing. I'm just speaking from my personal experience, and considering we have very similar starting journeys, I want to make sure you hear my perspective on this. But just know, and this goes for anybody out there, that if you do prefer the Amex Gold card and you do get a ton of value out of it and you are their target demographic, then that's great. Continue using it. You don't have to cancel this card. I just want to make sure that I don't feed into the hype of this card, especially for somebody that's more early on in their journey. Nick, all I want you to do is consider canceling this card for one main reason. You already have the Capital One Saver Rewards card, which covers you at 3% back on dining and groceries, which is really all the Gold card is ever used for. Granted, yes, you get 1 point per dollar more with the Gold card, but with the Saver Rewards card, you're paying no annual fee, while with the Gold card, you're paying the $325 annual fee. So again, if you are naturally getting positive value from the credits on the Gold card, then the math might make sense to keep that one. But these days, we have so many competitive options, one of which you already have in your setup. So if you're looking to lower your annual fee burden and just set yourself up for future success, the Gold card might not be an essential for you. If you, for some reason, really need access to Amex's specific partners, then maybe this card would make sense to keep long term. But in this specific case, as you noted, United is the only airline that you frequent, and you don't have any hotel preferences. So to me, that's not the case here. Nick's only other annual fee card in his setup is the Capital One Venture X, and I shared all of my thoughts on that card recently in my 2-year review. So without repeating myself too much here, I would say that this card is still one that's pretty dang easy to justify, and it's a great first step into the premium travel credit card space, so I think it probably fits Nick's setup pretty well. But with that said, and this goes out to everybody again, don't let that assumption of this card being really easy to get positive value from influence your personal valuation of it. Like if you're somebody that does not want to actually book travel in cash through Capital One's travel portal, hurdles and wouldn't do that without this card, then maybe it doesn't make sense. But again, that's completely up to personal preference. These days, opportunity cost is just so expensive with all of the card options we have out there. So I would just urge Nick to do an effective annual fee calculation with this card and any other annual fee card he has every single year. Take out the value of the welcome offer if this is your first year of having it, and see what you can reasonably expect to get from it from years to come, and that'll help you decide whether or not you should keep or cancel it. Let's say he does end up canceling the gold card in year 2. That's going to effectively cut his annual fee burden in half, down to just $395, the Venture X's annual fee. And I would say that's super manageable and sets him up for success in being able to get more annual fee cards in the future without increasing to this burden and having cards that he might not actually need. And with that topic in mind, future success, let's talk about what cards I'd consider adding next in his position, since that's where I think we can maximize the return on investment for Nick's specific wallet audit here. To me, the next few cards he should consider are very straightforward, but I don't think he's going to like how long he has to wait in order to get them. In my opinion, a few months ago was the best time to get the Chase Sapphire Preferred for Nick specifically because he was under 524, but the next best time will be at the end of February in 2026. As I mentioned off the top, his velocity in 2024 is what's dictating that next Chase card application. So if he does want to complete that Chase Duo, get the Chase Sapphire Preferred, and unlock Chase's transfer partners, which is key for somebody looking to do this transferable currency game, he's going to have to sit on his hands, unfortunately. Of course, in the meantime, he could go for non-Chase business cards, but he's so early on in his journey that it just probably doesn't make sense to start going for those yet. At least that was the case for me back then, since I had such low spend. Luckily, he's already completed the Capital One Duo with his Venture X and Saver Rewards card, and he has a few other cards that really cover all of his daily spending categories very well. So he's not at risk of missing out on a ton of value by sitting on his hands for the next, basically year. And the only other category that he doesn't have covered right now would be gas station purchases. And that's why the second card I would look into would be the City Custom Cash. Using that card for gas and, spending less than $500 per month in that category will lock in 5% on all of those purchases and help him start earning City thank you points, which he noted he is looking to get at some point. That becomes a really easy set and forget card for your gas purchases. And then down the line even further, he could get the City Strata Premier, which acts just like the Chase Sapphire Preferred does for the Chase ecosystem for City. So as long as he sat on those City thank you points that he earned on the custom cash, alongside the welcome offer on the Strata Premier, well, now I have, probably over 100,000 points sitting there waiting to be used for a future trip. And maybe that trip would be that Europe one in 2026. I don't think it's unrealistic to say that he could complete this entire, recommendation list that I just gave in the next 12 to 18 months. And he could do it a lot quicker too if he wasn't already, stuck at 524. And with his existing cards and those future card considerations, he'd have a super flexible credit card setup, earning in different transferable currency ecosystems, as well as a couple of cashback supplemental cards. And then after that, he could turn his attention to getting cards just for their welcome offers, or maybe adding in the hotel and airline cards to further supplement that core credit card setup that he already has. Overall, Nick, I would say that you're killing it, but just be careful with that velocity and take into account that 524 rule, especially, while you're still trying to finish out that side of your setup. No matter how many credit cards you have, an easy way to ensure that you're not leaving money on the table is with the sponsor of today's video, Max Rewards, specifically their automatic offer activation feature that you get through their paid tier, Max Rewards Gold. With that membership, any of your cards linked to their app will have all of their offers automatically activated for them, meaning that you don't have to go into each lender's apps specifically to click the little plus icons next to each offer. It's all done for you in the background. Last year alone, this feature saved me over $100, which more than covered the annual subscription of Max Rewards Gold. And that was with me not changing my spending habits at all, or even checking the offers on my cards. So there's no telling how much more I could have saved if I just even went into the app once a month to see, maybe how to switch my spend to certain cards to activate certain offers. This is perfect for times when you're doing some extra shopping, like maybe for my birthday here coming up on March 26th. And while it is a really nice feature, of course, Max Rewards has plenty of free features as well. And a couple of my favorites are going to be the best card feature that tells you exactly what card to use depending on where you're shopping to get the most value back, as well as their offer trackers for either new card welcome offers or retention offers if, for one of your existing cards. But what I use more than anything is just their home screen, taking a quick look to see exactly how many points I have across all my cards. Plus, I can see my total card balances, my bill due dates, and so much more. So if you want to get a better handle on your credit card setup as a whole, I would highly suggest checking out Max Rewards. And if you do want to, please download it through the link in my description. And during the sign-up process, if you enter the promo code Spencer, you'll get a 1-month discount off of your annual Max Rewards Gold subscription if you ever do decide to upgrade. Big thanks to Max Rewards as always for sponsoring this video, but let's get back into the content. Next up, we have Tyler, who has a very straightforward setup of which I really don't feel like I need to touch too much, aside from ensuring that he's maximizing every dollar spent with the current cards he has, and help him consider future cards that would make his setup more flexible and just better to use. Tyler definitely has a much more hit it and quit it approach, I guess you could call it, where he goes for 3 to 4 cards within the same week, once a year. He has a very heavy emphasis on cashback. That's really what all of his cards are. And he only applies for personal cards. So right now he's at 824, not dropping back to 424 until July 1st of 2026, assuming he won't be applying for any more personal cards in the meantime, which I don't think will be the case. I'd say he's more of an LOL 24 guy and really probably won't be considering Chase cards too heavily. And to be fair, being on Team Cashback, Chase's credit cards are really not that competitive for you, aside from the Chase Freedom Flex, which he already has. Well, first things first, only 2 of his 13 credit cards have annual fees on them, and they're at that low end of $95 each. One of those is one of the best cashback credit cards in the game, the Amex Blue Cash Preferred, and this is kind of the big brother of the Blue Cash Everyday, so for those of y'all that don't know which one you should maybe go with, the number to focus on is the break-even point of spending in the 6% categories on the Blue Cash Preferred versus the 3% categories on the Blue Cash Everyday, and that number is $3,167 per year. If you spend more than that in the 6% categories, then you're better off with the Blue Cash Preferred. Any less than that, you're better off with the Blue Cash Everyday. That is an oversimplification though, because the cards have different earning categories a little bit and slightly different credits as well. But overall, that's a really good way to, at least start your analysis. When it comes to earning categories for Tyler here though, what he should really be concerned about is not the Blue Cash Preferred versus Everyday, but using the Blue Cash Preferred versus a card like the City Custom Cash. Yes, he can get 6% back on groceries and streaming with the Blue Cash Preferred, and we'll focus in on the grocery category alone, where he can get 5% back on the City Custom Cash with no annual fee. Of course, only up to $500 a month though. I do assume this is part of the reason why he got the City Strata Premier recently, because he obviously is not somebody that really cares about unlocking City's travel partners. It's likely the move that he'll eventually downgrade that card to another City Custom Cash and have more flexibility. And then maybe if he does use that card for groceries, he'll downgrade that Blue Cash Preferred to the Everyday. But overall, with his annual fees, he's paying a total of $190, and both of the cards seem to make sense for him right now. Maybe he will downgrade them, and then his annual fees go back to $0 per year. So overall, not much to comment about there. And looking at his earning categories and where there may be gaps that I can help him out with, honestly, it's really hard to find any. And that's because he has a lot of cashback credit cards covering him at about 5% back on every one of his main purchases. Honing in on some of the go-tos in his setup, the most interesting to me are going to be those US bank cards that are kind of like Kroger partnered cards. Each one of these is basically a carbon copy of the other, offering you 5% back on mobile wallets and Kroger Pay purchases, 3% on dining and gas, and 2% on Kroger stores. Unfortunately, there is a tiny catch here, and that is that the 5% categories are capped at $3,000 in spend per year, which is pretty low. And the 3% categories are capped at $6,000, but we're less interested in those. To get around that cap though, what Tyler has intelligently done here is get 3 basically of the same cards to increase his cap to $9,000 a year on mobile wallet purchases. And that's going to cover a decent chunk of his spending really well. But in addition to that, he has some other really unique 5% back cards like the City Shop Your Way card, the City Custom Cash, as well as the Elon Max Cash Preferred cards. If you're anything like me, you may not have heard of the Shop Your Way card or the Elon Max Cash Preferred, so let me walk you through what they do real quick. The competitive advantages of the City Shop Your Way card is that it gives you 5% back on your gas purchases and 3% back on groceries and restaurants up to $10,000 per year. The catch here though is that you're not earning City thank you points. For somebody on Team Cashback, that really doesn't matter. But if you're looking at it as somebody on Team Travel, then this card probably is a lot less interesting. And you can also only redeem these points for gift cards is what I found, but you should be able to get 1 cent per point for that. So again, 5% back on gas up to $10,000 per year. That's pretty solid. The Elon Max Cash Preferred, on the other hand, is a more elusive card that was kind of hard for me to even learn about. And that's because it's basically just an archetype of a card that is offered by so many of the credit unions out there or just local banks. And even though this card doesn't go by the name Elon Max Cash Preferred with all those banks, the structure of it is exactly the same. What I found is that this card gives you 5% on 2 categories of your choice and 2% on 1 category of your choice. So it's basically the US Bank Cash Plus card, but you can get it from a ton of different lenders and therefore increase your cap quite a bit and cover more pesky categories that you might not be able to otherwise. On top of all the other cards I've mentioned so far, he has a couple of quarterly rotating cards in the Discover It and Chase Freedom Flex, as well as the City Double Cash to give him 2% back on all of his miscellaneous spend, if there is any left. So again, there's really not much to critique here on the earning side. And to me, this is the biggest lesson with cashback credit card setups. You have a really hard time going wrong with them because you're focused on no annual fee options. All of the big keep or cancel decisions that we're going to cover in the next setup with an annual fee burden of over $4,000, that does not apply here since you really have no reason to cancel any of your cards, being that they have no annual fee. So really the only way you can go wrong with this approach is if you go too quickly with it and lock yourself out with different lenders. And this is why the simplicity of a cashback setup is so appealing to me. And yes, I am on Team Travel, but still, you really can't beat that. No, your cashback cards aren't going to be metal, flashy, and a status symbol for you to, flex with your friends. But if you're getting 5% back on all of your purchases, you really can't complain. I know the diehard Team Travel folks are going to argue that 5% cashback doesn't even beat 3x back whenever you're earning points and miles. And while that's definitely true for the way that some people travel, like I mentioned in Nick's audit, the majority of people in the US are mainly traveling domestically and in economy. And with that being the case, the numbers between cashback and travel become a lot tighter. For example, every time that I redeem my Chase points for 1.5 cents per point through their portal, which is a redemption I'm very happy to do, that makes all of the spend that I did in the 3x categories on that card only worth 4.5% back. So technically I would have been better off with a 5% cashback card instead. There is of course going to be much more to the travel side of the credit card game though, specifically the credits and benefits that you have on those cards. So it's definitely not just about earning rates, but I'm not really sure how many people actually recognize that. I just realized that so far I really haven't given Tyler any feedback to take home. So let's go ahead and do that now. As I mentioned, I think his setup is already super solid right now, but that doesn't mean there aren't other cards we can add to it to make it even stronger. The name of the game for Tyler at this point is flexibility, so all of the cards that I'm going to mention in this section are going to help cover some of those low spend categories that he doesn't have covered yet. So that's cards like the US Bank Cash Plus, which most people would use for 5% back on home utilities, but Tyler already has that covered with that Elon Max Cash Preferred card. So he has the ability to use the US Bank Cash Plus for something that most other people don't, something like TV, internet, department stores, gyms, etc. Other than that, store credit cards are going to be something that play more and more of a role in his setup, I'm sure. Cards like the Target Red card that save you 5% on all of your Target purchases, the Verizon Visa for 4% back on Verizon purchases if he does, have a phone plan with them, and the Affinity Cash Rewards card for 5% back on Amazon purchases, which helps him get that earning category covered without having to go the Chase route with the Amazon Prime Visa. And that's just one of the many credit union cards that he should probably be considering. And I imagine it's one that he's already considered since Amazon is not covered yet on his current cards. As for a card that I think he'll have way on his back burner, I think the Chase Sapphire Preferred should be there, particularly if he's actually planning on taking any kind of trip down the line. Since he already has the Chase Freedom Flex, he could start stockpiling those points rather than cashing them out and use them alongside the welcome offer on the Chase Sapphire Preferred to cover a good portion of a nice trip. But like I said earlier, the soonest he could get that card would be July 1st of 2026. So unless he does want to just sit there and not get any more cards in the meantime, it won't be possible for him to use his Chase points in that fashion. Honestly, I have quite a bit to say about a travel versus cashback versus hybrid credit card setup, so let me know down below if you want to see a full video on that. But now let's move into wallet number 3 that comes from Juan. To lay out the groundwork of his setup, he runs a run and gun approach. Prefers to earn cashback if he has no travel plans, but as we'll see, he has a ton of travel credit cards. He travels 5 to 6 times per year, mainly domestically. Books with American Airlines and Hilton most often. Stated that he's currently avoiding Capital One and Barclays cards. And lastly, he's at 824 right now, not back down to 424 until April 8th of 2026. If he was to stop applying for personal cards. With the number of cards he has, we could be here forever. So instead of doing that, I'm going to basically cover 3 main takeaways that I had while reviewing his setup. And the first one of those is going to be that it's okay to slow down. From 2022 until today, he's been applying for 3 to 7 cards per year, most of which are personal, which has given him a ton of value for sure. But he's getting into the territory where it's going to become harder and harder to get approved for future cards if he's not careful. I imagine that's exactly why he noted that he's avoiding Capital One and Barclays right now, and why he hasn't applied for a Chase card since he got the Hyatt card back in 2022. While having a high velocity can be very beneficial and allows you to earn the most amount of points possible, which of course I'm all for, there are subtle downsides that have to be taken into consideration. Juan, I'm just using you as an example here, and maybe your strategy is working really well for you, so just take this with a grain of salt, but I think there's somebody out there that needs to hear this. I'm of the opinion that a spray and pray approach eventually will catch up to you, particularly when your eyes are always ahead to the next card and never reanalyzing the cards that you've already applied for. That's why sometimes rules like the Chase 524 rule and even Amex pop-up jail to an extent can be blessings in disguise and keep you from hurting yourself in the future. So this is a lesson for anybody that's really gung-ho and just wants to get every card possible right this second. Patience is key. It sucks to sit on your hands and watch elevated offers go by, but sometimes that's exactly what you have to do to stay in good graces with these lenders, as well as ensure that you're not wasting money on cards that you really don't need. Approaching the credit card game from the perspective of sustainability is super important, and it's honestly exactly how I approach my YouTube channel as well. There are times where I really want to just put out as many videos as possible and not think about the consequences of that, but that's a really quick road to burnout. And I think in a very similar way, this happens in the credit card game too. To me, the ultimate goal should really just be to earn enough credit card points every year to cover your travel expenses or whatever other expenses you've set aside if you're a cashback user. And most of us don't need 10 plus credit cards to do that, except for Uncle Luke, of course. I know some of y'all may think this is ironic that I give him this advice while implementing a very same approach, but honestly, I'm speaking to myself here too. There are periods of your life where having a high velocity makes sense, but I don't think it can continue that way forever. There's a fine line between playing this credit card game as a hobby versus having just a straight up addiction to it. And I'm definitely not saying that Juan is addicted here, but maybe somebody else out there is kind of walking that tightrope right now. Also, a big difference between Juan and I's approaches here is that he's mainly going for cards with high annual fees, while my focus is more on that business side, no annual fee options if I can do that. And that's helped me maintain the pace that I go at without wasting a ton of money. Speaking of, that brings me to my second takeaway with Juan's setup, and that is that it may be time to downsize. The biggest thing I noticed here is that he has a ton of overlap when it comes to benefits, earning categories, etc. And that is to be expected over time, so it's not necessarily an immediate problem. But being that his setup does have a ton of high annual fee cards in it, that's when this becomes something you need to look at closely. Juan's total annual fee burden is $4,339 per year, and I have a feeling we can trim that down very substantially, considering he only travels 5 to 6 times per year. There are 3 cards that jumped off the page for me when I looked at this as ones that he should probably be looking at downgrading or canceling. And of course, I'm going to be making assumptions here that I could be completely wrong about, but either way, I'm approaching this from my unique perspective, which should reveal lessons regardless of whether or not those assumptions were correct. Those 3 cards in my eyes are the Amex Gold card, Hilton Business, and Amex Business Platinum cards. With the Amex Gold card, Juan applied for that back in January of 2023, earlier on in the serious part of his credit card journey, I guess I'd say. And I assumed it served him really well at that time. But now, things are very different. Of course, the main case for his Gold card, as with everybody, is the 4x back on dining and groceries that it gives you. But now he has 4 other credit cards in his setup that offer him 3x back on dining, and 2 of those also cover him at 3x back on groceries as well, all with a much lower annual fee. And not to mention, he also has the Amex Blue Cash Preferred card that gives him 6% back on groceries. And with his preference to earn cash back over points and miles when he has no immediate travel plans, I have a hard time seeing how the Amex Gold card is actually worth it. If I was in his shoes, I would swap the Blue Cash Preferred in for my, normal grocery spend whenever I don't have a trip I'm planning for, and swap the dining spend over to one of his 3 city custom caches that will give a higher return on spend for no annual fee. That'll free up $325 from his total annual fees, and his Amex points will stay alive because of his no annual fee Amex Blue Business Plus card. So that's why I would say this one's probably an easy cancel. But an even easier cancel in my eyes is the Hilton Business card. And I say that because he already has the Hilton Aspire, so the benefits on the business card aren't doing really anything for him. And it's probably just one of those cards that he got for a bonus and maybe just hasn't canceled yet. And there's really not much else to say about this one. I think saving $195 per year by canceling that card is probably a great move. As for the Amex Business Platinum, this one is a bit more complicated, but for most people, unless you're using that 35% points rebate or the 1 cent per point cash out rate of Amex points through the Amex Business checking account with this card, the Business Platinum won't have a ton of competitive advantages over the Personal Platinum, so I consider it more of a welcome offer hunting card. So if he's not utilizing those features that I mentioned and he prefers the credits on the Personal card that he also has, I'd get rid of the Business version and save another $695 on annual fees. The one big thing to consider here is that if he was to cancel all 3 of those cards that I just mentioned, well, they're all Amex cards, so he's almost assuredly going to get thrown into pop-up jail if he's not there already. But if he did go through with it, instead of paying $4,339 for his annual fees, he'd be paying a much more manageable $3,124. You can see that I also have 4 questionable cards on his list, all of which have an annual fee of $450 or more. And I'd urge Juan to sit down and consider whether or not these cards actually make sense for him at this point. Because to me, the normal person doesn't need more than 1 premium transferable currency card, which he has 2 of. I guess 3 if you count the Business Platinum. And he also has 2 premium hotel cards that may be underutilized. Or worse, maybe they're technically properly utilized, but only because Juan goes out of his way to stay at certain resorts that he may not stay at otherwise, just because he has to get positive value from those cards. Overall, I see a ton of possibility to reduce Juan's total annual fees, and for some that may not sound like a super fun thing to do, but there are 2 levers we can pull in the personal finance game, at least generally, that being either increasing your income or decreasing your expenses. And in this case, I think there's actually many more expenses that you would decrease on top of not having to pay the annual fees for some of these cards, because you can disconnect some of your lifestyle from the perks and benefits on those cards. The third takeaway here is that you need to take time to roadmap. As I mentioned earlier, Juan is in a position where he has to tread really lightly with a lot of banks. So now is more important of a time than ever to be really meticulous with his roadmaps. Currently, it doesn't look like he cares really at all about his Chase 524 status, but I have a feeling he's going to come back to their cards at some point, and that's for one main reason: the Chase Ink cards. He's obviously somebody that's okay with adding business cards to his setup, and the fact that he has no Chase Ink cards yet is pretty surprising to me, because those cards, for a maximum of a $95 annual fee, are going to be constantly giving you 75,000 to 120,000 point welcome offers on them. So it just makes a ton of sense to go for those if you're going to have as high of a velocity as he does. The one issue here is that he won't be able to get those cards until April 8th of 2026 if he stops applying for any personal cards. So that goes back to takeaway number one, where I said it's okay to slow down. Other than that, I'd look at getting the Hawaiian and Alaska business cards, since he noted that American Airlines is his preferred airline of choice. Because as we talked about recently, there's currently a pathway to get Hawaiian miles to Alaska miles to book American Airlines flights. And by getting those two business cards, you've effectively earned a decent amount of American Airlines miles. Plus, the Hawaiian cards are going to be getting discontinued, so it makes sense to go for those sooner rather than later. And by getting these, he's not adding to his 524 count. So all in all, seems like a pretty smart move. I did notice that he's avoiding Barclays cards right now, though, and that's where the Hawaiian cards come from. And I imagine that's because of their 624 rule, but they seem to be very lenient on that. So I'd still probably consider giving it a shot, depending on whether or not you can take the hit to your credit score for that hard inquiry. At the end of the day, though, he basically has every single earning category covered at 5+% if you take into account the points valuations of the transferable currencies he earns in. And I'm particularly jealous of his 3-city custom caches. But I say that to point out the fact that there's really no rush in adding more cards to his setup. I'd consider spacing out each application by 3 months or so, at least at this point, and only go for business cards to garden your 524 status if you are interested in getting like those Chase Ink cards at some point, for example. That way, this approach becomes much more sustainable long term. As we just discussed with Juan's setup here, high annual fee cards can be amazing for the right person, but I'm of the opinion that a lot of people who have them are not the right person. And if you want to see whether or not you are, I'd highly urge you check out this video next. As always, Odin and I both want to say thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you did enjoy it, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel, and we'll catch you guys next time.